Walter Brennan wasn't just a Hollywood legend, he was a three-time Oscar winner and the grandfather figure America adored. But behind that kindly smile was a truth far more disturbing than anyone could imagine. Away from the cameras, Brennan cheered when civil rights leaders were gunned down, hoarded weapons inside hidden bunkers, and preached hate so openly that even his co-stars called him a bigot. Most shocking of all, he lent his trusted voice to extremist propaganda, poisoning the very fans who once loved him. This is the chilling truth about Walter Brennan that Hollywood never wanted you to know. The man who once charmed millions with his warm smile and lovable roles was, in reality, spreading messages of hate and fear. Off-screen, Walter Brennan lived a life so shocking it would leave fans speechless. A man trusted in American homes turned out to be hiding beliefs that shattered his carefully built image. Behind the curtain of Hollywood's golden era, Brennan's actions revealed a darkness that few could have imagined. Walter Andrew Brennan entered the world on July 25, 1894, in Lynn, Massachusetts, during a turbulent time when waves of Irish immigrants flooded New England searching for a better life. His parents were among the millions who had escaped famine and hardship, carrying with them resilience and determination. His father, an engineer and inventor, defied the odds by finding success in an era when Irish families still faced open prejudice. The Brennans lived humbly, their modest home standing only a couple of miles away from the affluent seaside town of Swampscott. Growing up, young Walter stood at the edge of two worlds, the struggles of his working-class neighborhood on one side, and the glitter of wealth and privilege on the other, a contrast that would shape both his ambitions and his worldview for years to come. This early exposure to two completely different worlds, the struggles of the working class and the luxury of the wealthy, gave Walter Brennan a rare perspective that would later help him embody characters from every walk of life. When he enrolled at Ring Technical High School in Cambridge, he initially followed in his father's footsteps, excelling in mechanical systems and technical drawing. But destiny had other plans. The school also offered a progressive drama program, and although Walter was known for his engineering brilliance, the stage began calling to him. At just 16, he stepped into his first role, portraying an elderly man, a surprising choice that foreshadowed the kind of roles that would define his career decades later. His background in mechanics gave him a unique way of thinking, and he began to treat acting like solving a technical puzzle. Each character became a machine with moving parts, and Brennan meticulously studied how every detail, posture, voice, gestures, fit together to create a living, believable person. It was this unusual blend of technical discipline and artistic instinct that set him apart, laying the foundation for one of Hollywood's most unexpected careers. Classmates referred to him as the professor due to his ability to calculate lighting angles and sound placement for school productions. When the United States entered World War I, Brennan enlisted in the Army in 1917, joining the 101st Field Artillery Regiment. In late 1918, during the Meuse-Argonne offensive, he encountered mustard gas, one of the most dreaded weapons of the war. Over 26,000 Americans lost their lives in that campaign, and Brennan suffered permanent damage to his vocal cords and lungs. The high, reedy quality of his voice originated from that injury. His comrades teased him for it, unaware that it would eventually lead to him winning 3 Oscars. The ordeal also left deeper emotional scars. Survivors of mustard gas frequently faced lifelong respiratory problems and symptoms of what is now known as PTSD. After the war, Brennan relocated to Guatemala to attempt pineapple farming. Initially, the venture appeared promising. American investors were heavily investing in Central American agriculture, anticipating substantial returns. His farm was situated in fertile volcanic soil near the Pacific coast, and the early profits were so robust that he later joked he couldn't spend the money quickly enough. However, by 1922, calamity struck. Plant diseases ravaged the crops. Political instability rocked the nation, and an oversupply of tropical fruit in the U.S. market caused prices to plummet. Brennan lost nearly everything and had to work on a merchant ship to earn his way back home. This failure hardened his perspective on money. In the years that followed, even as one of Hollywood's richest actors, he maintained a conservative and cautious approach to finances. By 1925, Brennan had moved to Los Angeles just as the city's real estate market was booming. He amassed a fortune by buying and selling undeveloped land, taking advantage of property values that sometimes doubled within months. He made investments in what would eventually be considered great real estate in Hollywood. However, the 1929 stock market crash brought the good days to an abrupt end. Brennan lost everything when the real estate boom crashed. He took any work he could find, ate at soup kitchens, and slept in his car. He started working as a movie extra in 1925, making brief appearances in movies including Lorraine of the Lions, The Calgary Stampede, and Webs of Steel. Director Richard Thorpe frequently utilized him for supporting roles because of his distinctive voice and gruff appearance from the war. During the late 1920s and early 1930s, Brennan made over 20 film appearances. Working for several studios for a few years. He appeared in comedies, horror movies, and westerns. In 1935, he played an uncredited part in Bride of Frankenstein. Even before the public recognized his name, he was one of Hollywood's most dependable character actors due to his flexibility and work ethic. Sam Goldwyn's The Wedding Night, starring Gary Cooper, marked a sea change in 1935. Goldwyn saw Brennan's performance in a small, uncredited role as a cab driver, and the character was enlarged while the movie was being filmed. He signed a long-term contract with Goldwyn and received his first screen credit as a result of the enlarged role. Later that year, that led to a part in Howard Hawks' Barber Coast. Brennan credits the movie with launching his career. Brennan received the first-ever Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in 1936 for his performance as Swan Bostonram in Come and Get It. He brought compassion and nuance to a role that could have been a cliché by portraying Swan over the course of several decades of the character's life, from a young guy to an elderly widower. He became a late-blooming star after the victory at age 42, landing leading and co-starring parts in movies like 1937's Wild and Woolly and Affairs of Cappy Ricks. He was already well known in 1938. However, he hardly ever played the part of Peter Goodwin in Kentucky. He was prepared to retire after working non-stop since Christmas 1937. He was getting tired, yet he was dragged back by something. He spent weeks working with actual thoroughbred ads to learn the ins and outs of horse care. His commitment earned him his second Oscar in 3 years, and it encouraged 20th Century Fox to pursue further horse-themed hits. Brennan took over Muff Potter's tattered shoes in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer a year later. Brennan appeared considerably more worn than normal thanks to Technicolor makeup in this 1939 edition, which was the first significant color adaptation of Twain's book. In some respects, it was a role that was close to home. The character's melancholy had a genuine weight because he had struggled with alcohol before becoming famous. Tommy Kelly, a child actor, acknowledged that Brennan's acting made him uneasy on set. In order to perfect the dialect, Brennan researched Missouri speech patterns, which contributed to a representation that struck a balance between humanity and brokenness. After that, Brennan won his third Oscar in as few as 5 years in 1940 with The Westerner. He based his portrayal of Judge Roy Bean on historical accounts of a man who combined cruelty with a distorted sense of justice. Bean prepared by writing, filming, and researching his actual court cases. One notorious scene, in which Bean discovered a dead guy for carrying a concealed weapon, was taken straight from the transcripts. There was discussion about whether Brennan had been put in the incorrect category after his screen time almost equaled Gary Cooper's. His 3 Best Supporting Actor victories were so overwhelming that the Academy altered its regulations to prevent any actor from dominating the category in the future. Brennan returned to the cinema in 1941, this time as Pastor Rosier Pyle in Sergeant York. He accepted the role and carefully constructed it, although at first he was apprehensive due to his own complex sentiments regarding religion following his service in World War I. In order to become a more grounded Tennessee preacher, Howard Hawks advised him to temper his typical eccentricities. To understand the conviction behind the statements, he studied under Pentecostal ministers. With almost $16 million, the movie became the biggest grossing of the year. Even though Gary Cooper received the most of the limelight, Brennan's performance in The Pride of the Yankees served as the moral center of the movie and earned him another Oscar nomination. Brennan's function the next year was modeled after that of sports journalist Paul Gallico. His portrayal was informed by his longtime love of baseball, and the script was shaped by his knowledge with the terminology of the game. He listened to game broadcasts to learn the rapid-fire speech of sports reporters in the 1930s, and he was able to stand on camera with Babe Ruth and other sports greats without losing his credibility. His own recommendations regarding batting records were included in the final version. The movie was nominated for 11 Oscars and was added to the National Film Registry. Brennan joined Bogart and Beale in Have and Have Not 2 years later. William Faulkner had to write on the spot because the script was only 30 pages long when filming started. While the characters' quiet romance simmered off camera, Brennan filled in the blanks with improvised lines, the most well-known of which was you ever stung by a dead bee? Brennan created a drunken sailor character that spectators adore, and he managed to keep the production stable despite the mayhem. The movie became one of 1944's highest-grossing films. Brennan had changed once more by 1946, this time playing Old Man Clanton in My Darling Clementine. Based on tales Wyatt Earp had told him, Ford created the passable corral firefight, and Brennan's vicious father provided a terrifying focal point for the movie. Only a harsh, threatening presence that seemed based in actual violence was present. There was no humor. Because of his efforts, the movie became a permanent part of American cinema and was eventually added to the National Film Registry. Brennan played the role of Nain Groot, a cook on a huge cattle drive in Red River 2 years later. He served as a mentor off-screen and a mediator on-screen, surrounded by John Wayne and up-and-coming Montgomery Clift. High appreciation was given to the film's expansive voyage from Texas to Kansas. Additionally, Brennan's warmth and humor mitigated the story's more severe aspects. He appeared in one of the few westerns set during Alaska's gold rush, The Far Country, by 1954. His portrayal as a prospector who was both devoted and greedy, opposite James Stewart, showed Anthony Mann's changing take on the genre. Brennan seems to have endured decades in the wild, even on artificial snow fields. Rio Bravo, released in 1959, was his last major Western role. At 65, he introduced Stumpy, the hobbling deputy loyal to John Wayne's sheriff, to both weakness and grit. Audiences sensed a genuineness in the act because of his own aging. Brennan, surrounded by Ricky Nelson and Dean Martin, was the unifying factor in the mismatched bunch. In order to allow their relationships more time to develop, Hawks even prolonged the film's duration. The ultimate product was a Western that focused on friendship and devotion, capping Brennan's career in the genre. In 1957, Walter Brennan made the transition from cinema to television by playing Grandpa Amos McCoy. He became one of the most recognizable figures in America during the course of 6 seasons and 24 episodes. He had previously been a dependable supporting actor in motion pictures. He became well known after the actual McCoys. He won 3 Emmys for Best Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series for this one part since the metamorphosis was so complete. That has never been done by any other actor. Brennan participated in one of the most elaborate films ever produced in 1962. There was more to How the West Was Won than merely a Western. Over $15 million was spent by MGM on the Cinerama Spectacular. In the Civil War part, Brennan played Colonel Jeb Hawkins, flanked by actors Gregory Peak, James Stewart, and John Wayne. He was still in control of the screen at 68. It was not the same to act for Cinema. Because of the enormous curved screen, a unique performing approach was needed. Brennan adapted easily because of his decades of experience working with silent and Technicolor films. His star power was just as powerful in big-budget motion pictures as it was on television, as seen by the film's subsequent global box office success of over $50 million. Brennan tried something closer to home 2 years later. The Tycoon lasted for 32 episodes from September 15, 1964, to April 27, 1965. He portrayed Walter Andrews, a millionaire who had to start over and restore his fortune. His life was reflected in the character. Brennan had amassed a fortune in real estate in the 1920s, but the market crash cost him the most of it. He infused the character with that experience. Once more, Horatio Alger, the pilot, was almost a personal tale. His only true television failure, the show failed to connect with viewers despite receiving positive reviews and having excellent production standards. Brennan went back to the Western, his strongest ground, in 1967. One of television's most iconic phrases came from the 50-episode series The Guns of Wilsonnet. Just the facts, no boasting. Brennan portrayed a grandfather looking for his son, a gunfighter, who had gone AWOL. He was still handling weapons and riding horses at the age of 73. With the son appearing in just 14 episodes, the show employed a slow-burn storytelling technique to keep viewers interested. A rare and satisfying ending was provided to viewers in the finale, as all three generations became lawmen in the same community. By the beginning of the 1970s, Brennan was coming to an end. At the age of 76, he played an Irish grandfather in Rome with Love, his last television appearance. He joined icons like Roy Rogers and John Wayne when he was inducted into Oklahoma City's Western Performers Hall of Fame in 1970. He had acted in almost 230 parts by the time of his death on September 21, 1974, at the age of 80. He is still the only man to dominate television and win 3 Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actor. The address of his star is still 6501 Hollywood Boulevard. Brennan led a stable personal life away from the cameras. On October 17, 1920, he wed Ruth Caroline Wells. Prior to Brennan's passing, they were married for 54 years. Ruth, who survived until 1997, when she died at the age of 99 from emphysema, the same disease that had killed her husband, helped him through his financial breakdown and subsequent prosperity. Away from Hollywood, Brennan also established a strong family basis. He paid $40,000 in 1940 for the 12,000-acre Lightning Creek Ranch in Oregon. He made it a full-fledged business, complete with a store, movie theater, and motel. Just the barn was 212 feet long and 65 feet broad. Between roles, he would flee to the ranch, which was powered by gas generators. Although he hardly ever fired a shot personally, he frequently went hunting there with his grandson, Mike. His presence is maintained by the fact that some of his family members still reside nearby. Brennan's conservatism had a more overt influence on his home life in the 1960s. Persuaded that the Beatles' music threatened American values, he forbade his grandchildren from listening to them at all. This occurred between 1964 and 1966, when the band was at its height, and Brennan interpreted it as a component of a broader cultural downturn associated with the counterculture movement. Even if his own family's generational divide widened as a result of his tough stance. Another anchor was faith. As a devout Roman Catholic, Brennan held daily prayers at home. In the 1960s, he made his views more widely known, particularly in 1964 when he addressed Project Prayer in Los Angeles in support of school prayer following Supreme Court decisions that had ruled against it. He believed that religion was an essential safeguard against moral decay, and he reflected this view in both his public and familial life. One of America's most adored grandfathers on cinema was Walter Brennan. Millions of living rooms trusted him because of his voice, smile, and kind demeanor. However, he was taking a completely other route away from the cameras. He became a member of the ultra-conservative, far-right John Birch Society in the 1960s, which held that communists had already infiltrated the U.S. government. The founder of the group even asserted that President Eisenhower was involved in a communist plot. Brennan became their finance chairman rather than only quietly endorsing them. He filmed propaganda for the group, spreading warnings about a purported communist takeover, using the same friendly Grandpa Amos voice that people were familiar with from the genuine McCoys. His reputation turned into a weapon and his notoriety into a tool. He was so closely associated with the party by 1972 that he provided his voice to advertisements for John Schmitz, a far-right presidential candidate. Brennan's politics extended beyond private gatherings. He endorsed Barry Goldwater's presidential campaign in 1964 and commended him for opposing the Civil Rights Act. The statute was actually removing legal segregation in America, despite Goldwater's claims that it was unconstitutional. That, in Brennan's opinion, was the reason he supported him. He addressed lectures, went on public appearances, and joined a campaign against racial equality. 4 years later, he criticized Richard Nixon for being too liberal and supported George Wallace, who had made a living by advocating for segregation. This change demonstrated Brennan's progress toward overtly white nationalist politics. Additionally, he started portraying all of the 1960s significant social movements as the product of foreign adversaries. He did not see anti-war demonstrations, civil rights marches, or even urban riots as manifestations of rage over injustice. They were the product of conspiracies by communists. He asserted that if agitators hadn't stirred them up, African-Americans would have been quite happy with segregation. Because of his extreme paranoia, Brennan prepared a bunker at home with food and weapons in case the Soviet Union invaded. His co-workers on the filming of The Guns of Will Sonnet recalled his stating that a machine gun may have prevented the Watts riots in 1965. It wasn't merely empty words. In response to calls for justice, that remark was a call for mass murder. His opinions weren't limited to private discussions. He recorded the song, "He's Your Uncle, Not Your Dad," in 1965. By portraying it as a communist scheme to make Americans reliant on the government rather than their families, it challenged President Lyndon Johnson's fight against poverty. It was cruelly timed. Millions of people were being lifted out of poverty by Johnson's initiatives. However, the idea that social services were harmful and un-American was strengthened by Brennan's audio, which circulated across far-right networks. Brennan was just as vocal in his endorsement of Ronald Reagan's 1966 and 1970 bids for governor of California. Reagan vowed to clean up the mess at UC Berkeley and ran a strong campaign against the counterculture and student demonstrators. In interviews, Brennan repeated such accusations, labeling demonstrators Marxists and beatniks, and even accused Henry Fonda and other Hollywood colleagues of being subversives. His vocabulary was always conspiracy-oriented and sharper than that of most conservative celebs. Then followed the scenes that would astound his colleagues. As early as April 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. Brennan's response on set was one of genuine joy. Stanley Frossen, a television editor, remembered him dancing, laughing, even celebrating. The same joyful, unconstrained response was given by Brennan 2 months after Robert F. Kennedy was shot. Entire crews witnessed these public demonstrations rather than secret whispers. He seemed to view the deaths of those who battled for progressive ideas and civil rights as triumphs. The trend was obvious. Justice was never the focus of the civil rights movement, according to Brennan. He believed it to be a communist plot to undermine the United States. He was able to overlook decades of hardship and persecution because of his principles. Rather, he dedicated his life to promoting such opinions via speeches, recordings, and one-on-one discussions. The reality was known by those who worked closely with him. Everett Greenbaum, a television writer who worked for the actual McCoys for years, referred to Brennan as a bigot who often made racial comments. It was not a casual slip. It was his identity. Behind the endearing TV granddad was a guy who felt that the nation was under siege and was prepared to use his notoriety to incite hatred, fear, and division. Most fans could never have imagined the distance between the Walter Brennan that America loved and the Walter Brennan that lived off-screen. Inside the 60s, at the peak of the Cold War, he constructed a big underground bunker under his property. This wasn't simply a place to store canned goods. It changed into a castle. Interior have been weapons, scientific system, and enough meals to remaining his own family for months. He believed the Soviet Union turned into making ready to invade the USA at any moment, and he wanted to be ready. His kids grew up above this hidden refuge, knowing their father spent plenty of his time stocking shelves and checking supplies. His fears failed to forestall at the concept of overseas armies. Brennan believed communists had already infiltrated Hollywood itself. Even John Wayne, the person who embodied American patriotism on display screen, wasn't safe from his suspicions. He stored an enemy's listing of humans he conceived were part of the conspiracy, and it protected names no person anticipated. In 1965, at a John Birch Society convention, Brennan recorded speeches in his Grandpa Amos voice, warning that Hollywood become packed with communist marketers. He might take a look at co-stars in subtle ways, asking loaded political questions to see how they responded. To him, disagreement turned into evidence of disloyalty. On movie units. This created tension and mistrust that observed him till the stop of his profession. To him, their fashion, humor, and effect had been a weapon aimed at the United States' youngsters. He believed their reputation was synthetic via communist forces to create generational struggle. He took this so seriously that he checked his grandchildren's music collections, confiscated Beatles statistics, and even told them now not to spend time with fans of the band. His own family recalled the uncomfortable tension this created. But Brennan saw it as shielding them from a dangerous shape of propaganda. When protests towards the Vietnam warfare spread throughout the USA, Brennan noticed them not as expressions of unfastened speech, however as signs and symptoms of overseas control. In interviews, he claimed those demonstrations were organized by means of communist sellers running at once with Moscow and Beijing. To him, no proper American could protest the warfare except they had been manipulated. The darkest aspect of his ideals emerged in 1968 whilst he overtly celebrated the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy. Satisfied each men were part of the communist plot. These moments found out how some distance his paranoia had long gone. He now not noticed opponents as human beings, but as enemies whose deaths have been victories. Whilst Brennan died on September 21, 1974, the general public photo remained untouched. Newspapers known as him the USA's best man or woman actor. A three-time Academy Award winner who had seemed an extra than 230 roles. Hollywood prevented speaking approximately his extremist ideals. His funeral became a tribute to his attraction on screen, now not a reckoning with the reality of his non-public life. Studio executives had long acknowledged approximately his political sports, however that they had saved them out of the clicking, casting him in wholesome roles, at the same time as he recorded speeches attacking civil rights leaders. Many years later, Carl Reison's 2015 biography sooner or later added these hidden truths into the open. The usage of letters, circle of relatives information, and interviews, Reison confirmed how Brennan's marriage to Ruth Wells helped shield his activities from public scrutiny. She did not just assist him. She helped distribute his political recordings and joined him at a ways proper activities. The e-book forced a brand new communication approximately how a lot we can separate an actor's work from their private beliefs. Some theaters stopped showing his films and film files began adding warnings approximately his political extremism. The person Hollywood had as soon as protected become ultimately being visible incomplete. His attraction and skills forever shadowed with the aid of the fears that had dominated his existence.